The frosted glass doors of the private emergency wing of Meridian Elite Medical Center in San Francisco opened that afternoon, and a man walked in without an appointment, without calling ahead, and without acknowledging the receptionist who immediately looked up to greet him. The entire wing felt it. He was Korean, tall, dressed in a dark navy jacket over a simple black shirt. His hair was cut close on the sides and slightly longer on top, pushed back in a way that looked effortless but probably wasn't. He was not young in the way that meant inexperienced. He was young in the way that meant he had gotten to where he was very fast and knew exactly how he had done it. His left hand was wrapped in what looked like a folded piece of a dress shirt, white fabric, now faintly stained at the center. He held it against his side as he walked, not cradling it dramatically, just holding it steady. Like the injury was a minor inconvenience in a day full of more important things. He sat down in one of the chairs along the wall. He did not speak to the receptionist. He did not pick up a form. He did not look around the room the way people usually do when they enter an unfamiliar space. He simply sat, jacket straight, back against the chair, eyes forward. The three other staff members at the station exchanged glances. A man in a dark jacket and expensive shoes had entered without speaking, sat down with an injured hand, and seemed completely unbothered by the fact that no one had checked him in. Behind him, near the entrance, two men in dark clothing stood without sitting. They were not part of the hospital staff. They had not been asked to stand there. They simply stood there, and no one asked them to leave, because asking men who looked like that to leave required a confidence that the front desk staff did not currently have. Every nurse in the wing glanced at him. Every nurse looked away. Every nurse except Olivia. Olivia Carter was 29 years old. She had been a registered nurse for 3 years, all of them at Meridian, and in that time she had treated professional athletes with inflated egos, tech billionaires who Googled their symptoms before she could explain anything, and at least 2 reality television personalities who had tried to negotiate their treatment plan. She was not easily rattled. She was not easily impressed. And she had developed a very particular kind of calm, not the distant, clinical calm of someone who had switched their feelings off, but the grounded, collected calm of someone who had learned exactly how much energy to give each situation. She was currently standing near the nursing station reviewing a medication chart when she noticed him. She looked at the wrapped hand. She looked at his face. She did a quick, practiced read, alert, not pale, not sweating, breathing normally, no visible signs of shock or significant blood loss. Minor injury, probably a laceration. She set the chart down, picked up a fresh clipboard, and walked over to him. She stopped in front of his chair. He looked up. She said, "That's going to need stitches. Come with me." Not a question. Not, "Sir, can I help you today?" Not a performance of warmth designed to make a high-value patient feel comfortable. Just a direct, professional statement and a direction to follow. He looked at her for exactly 1 second. Not a long look, not a calculating one, just a single beat of taking in the person in front of him. Then he stood and followed her. She led him down the corridor to one of the private treatment rooms, clean white walls, a padded exam table, a tray of supplies already set near the window. She pulled on a pair of gloves, gestured for him to sit on the table, and then reached for his hand. He gave it to her without hesitation. She unwrapped the makeshift covering and examined the cut. It ran across the center of his palm, clean, straight, about 1.5 inches long, deep enough for stitches but not deep enough for anything more serious. She rotated his hand slightly, checking the edges, checking the color of the surrounding skin. She said, "How did this happen?" He said, "Glass." She said, "Broken glass or glass you were using?" A very short pause. "Broken." She nodded. She was not fishing for a story. She was establishing context for the injury. She went through her standard questions in the flat, practiced rhythm of someone who had asked them hundreds of times: blood thinners, allergies, last tetanus shot, any numbness in the fingers. He answered each one briefly and correctly. He did not complicate the conversation. He did not ask her to explain herself. She appreciated that more than she would have admitted. She began cleaning the wound. Antiseptic first, which stung in the specific way that antiseptic on an open palm always stings. She watched him in her peripheral vision as she worked, not starring, just keeping the quiet clinical awareness that nurses develop automatically. Heart rate, tension in the body, breathing pattern. He did not flinch. He did not make a sound. But halfway through the cleaning, she glanced up for a half second and caught something behind his eyes that stopped her internal clock for just a moment. He was not watching her work. He was looking slightly past her, at nothing in particular, with an expression that she had seen before on a specific kind of patient, the kind who was in the room but carrying something much heavier than the reason they came in. It was not pain she saw every day. This was something older, something that sat differently in a person's face. She did not comment on it. It was not her place, and it was not the time. But she did something on the next pass of the gauze. She was lighter. Not in a way she narrated to herself. It was the kind of adjustment that came from instinct, from years of treating people who were more than their charts. He noticed. She could tell he noticed because the slight tension across his shoulders shifted. Not gone, just changed. She threaded the needle and worked through the stitches carefully. 5 of them, even and precise. She had good hands. She had always had good hands. When she tied off the last one and began applying the dressing, she was already mentally composing the aftercare instructions. She pulled a printed sheet from the tray, set it on the table beside him, and began explaining, keep it clean. Keep it dry for 48 hours, signs of infection to watch for, when to come back for removal. He listened, without interrupting. When she was finished, he reached for his jacket with his uninjured hand. He stood. He moved toward the door. She was already turning back to the tray, beginning to organize the used supplies. Then she heard him stop. She looked up. He was standing in the doorway, looking back at her. His expression was the same controlled, unreadable expression it had been the whole time, but there was something slightly different in the way he was looking at her, like he was processing something he had not expected to process. He said, "You didn't ask who I was." She looked at him evenly. Then she said, "You didn't ask who I was either. We're even." She went back to the tray. She heard nothing for a moment. Then the door opened and closed. She stood there for a beat, looking at the tray. Then she pulled off her gloves, dropped them in the bin, and picked up the clipboard to update the chart. Down the corridor, near the frosted glass entrance, one of the men in dark clothing spoke quietly in Korean to the man in the navy jacket. The man in the navy jacket said nothing back. He pushed through the doors and walked out. His name was Sangwoo Park. And he had not thought about any single person, the way he was currently thinking about a nurse in blue scrubs, with a coffee stain on her left pocket, in a very long time. Raymond Cho had worked alongside Sangwoo for 11 years. He had seen him walk out of boardrooms, out of negotiations, out of situations that would have cracked most people, with the same steady, unreadable expression every time. He had learned to read the differences in that expression the way a person learns to read whether subtle shifts that meant very different things depending on the context. The expression Sangwoo came out of that hospital wing, wearing, was not one Raymond had seen before. He filed it away without saying anything. He opened the car door. They drove back to the Nob Hill penthouse in silence. She treated him like any other patient. He left that room a completely different man, and neither one of them knew it yet. Tell me something. Have you ever talked to someone for just a few minutes and spent the rest of the day thinking about them without knowing why? Drop it in the comments. I want to know. Also, go ahead and like the video. And if you're not subscribed yet, please go ahead and do so that you won't be missing good stories like this. Now, let's continue. 3 days passed. Sangwoo reviewed 3 investment reports, attended 2 private meetings in the financial district, had dinner at his penthouse alone both evenings, and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Nob Hill apartment for longer than usual on the second night, looking out over San Francisco Bay without any particular agenda. He was not the kind of man who sat with unclear feelings. He was organized, deliberate. He dealt in precision. And so when he found himself, on the morning of the 3rd day, thinking about the way a nurse in a private hospital wing had looked at him like he was exactly as ordinary as anyone else, he decided to deal with it the only way that made sense to him. He went back to the hospital. He told Raymond it was a follow-up appointment. Raymond said, "Your follow-up isn't scheduled until day 7. Sangwoo said, "There may be irritation around the wound." Raymond looked at him for exactly 3 seconds. Then he said, "I'll bring the car around." He did not say anything else, because Raymond was smart. At the hospital, Sangwoo requested the same nurse. The front desk staff, who had by now been quietly briefed, by a very nervous hospital administrator who had done a very thorough background check after the first visit, moved with the specific careful energy of people who understood that some requests were less like requests and more like statements. A message went to the nursing station. On the floor, Tasha, Olivia's best friend and fellow nurse, who had been working alongside her for 2 years, leaned over and said in a low voice, "Olivia, your stitches guy is back, and the front desk is acting like the president just called." Olivia looked up from the chart she was updating. Tasha added, "He asked for you specifically." Olivia set the chart down. She kept her face neutral. She was good at that. She walked to the treatment room. He was sitting on the edge of the exam table when she came in. Jacket off this time, laid across the chair in the corner. He was looking at his phone but put it away when the door opened. She noticed that the deliberateness of it, the way he chose to give his attention to the person in the room rather than split it. She walked up, took his hand, the bandaged one, and examined it carefully. The dressing was clean. No seeping, no swelling. The skin around the stitches was the right color, no redness extending outward, no heat. She said, "Your stitches look fine." He said, "I know." She looked up at him. A small pause formed between them. She said, "Then what are you here for?" He did not answer immediately, and that was unusual enough to register. This was a man whose entire presence communicated that he always had an answer. He always knew what he meant to say. The pause was small, a few seconds at most, but it was real. He said, "I thought there might be irritation around the wound." She looked back at the hand. She checked the surrounding skin again, thoroughly, because she was a nurse and that was what she did. She pressed gently along the edges. She checked the stitch tension. She examined each point of entry. Nothing, perfect healing. She said, "There's no irritation. Your wound is healing exactly the way it should. Your stitches can come out in 4 more days." She reached to the counter, picked up a pamphlet on wound care, and held it out to him. He looked at the pamphlet. He took it. She began gathering her supplies. He should have reached for his jacket at that point. He should have nodded and walked out. That was what a follow-up appointment that was not actually a follow-up appointment looked like when it reached its natural end. He said, "How long have you worked here?" She paused just slightly, then she turned back around. She looked at him with a specific kind of look that was measuring something, not size or status, but intent. She was reading him. She said, 3 years. He nodded. Then he said, "You could work anywhere." She tilted her head. "People keep telling me that like it's a compliment. It's actually just a way of asking why I'm here." He said, "Why are you here?" She considered him for a moment. She was waiting for the edge underneath the question, the implied suggestion that someone like her was in the wrong place, or not doing enough with her ability, or should have set her sights higher. She had heard that version many times. It always wore the mask of a compliment. But it was not in his voice. It was a plain, genuine question. She said, "The pay is good. The patients are usually too proud to be dramatic, and I'm good at my job. This is a good place to be good at your job." He said, "That's a better reason than most people give." She said, "Most people perform their reasons. I don't have time for that." Something moved across his face. Not quite a smile, something quieter. She picked up her supplies and moved toward the door. He said, "What's your name?" She looked back at him over her shoulder. "Olivia." He said, "Sangwoo." She said, "I know, it's on the chart," and she walked out. That evening, Olivia was sitting on the floor of her apartment in San Francisco's Marina District with a bowl of cereal and her laptop open, video calling Tasha, when she made the mistake of telling Tasha what had happened in the treatment room. Tasha put her phone so close to her own face that Olivia could see her pores. "He came back," Tasha said, "with a perfectly healed hand and asked for you by name, and you gave him a pamphlet." It was the correct clinical response. Olivia. His wound was healing fine, Tasha. He is a very attractive man who came back to a hospital for no medical reason, and your response was to hand him paper. Olivia ate a spoonful of cereal. I also told him when his stitches could come out. Very informative visit. Tasha stared at her. Do you know who he is? A patient. Olivia, Google him. I'm not going to Google my patient. He is barely your patient at this point. He was in and out in 8 minutes and his hand is perfectly fine and he asked for you by name. Google him. Olivia did not Google him. But later, after the call ended and the apartment was quiet, she sat with her cereal bowl empty and her laptop still open, and she thought about what he had said. Not the question about how long she had worked there, not his name or how he had said it. She thought about what he had said when she told him. She gave the honest reason for being where she was. He said, that's a better reason than most people give. Not impressed, not admiring, just recognizing something. Like a person who had spent a long time hearing performed answers and had forgotten what a real one sounded like. She closed the laptop. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost left it. She opened the message. Dinner, Saturday, you can say no. She read it twice. Then she read it a third time. She put the phone face down on the coffee table and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then she picked it back up. She stared at the message for a long time, long enough that the screen dimmed and she had to tap it awake again. She was a careful person. She had learned to be careful the specific way that comes from watching other people not be careful and paying attention to what happened next. She did not jump. She did not rush toward things because they looked good. She asked questions. She read situations. This situation was reading as, a powerful man who came back to a hospital with a healed hand asked her to dinner and was giving her the option to refuse. Most men who asked her out did not give her a clean exit. She thought about that. Then she thought about the way he had sat in that chair and not cradled his hand dramatically. The way he had given her his full attention when she explained the aftercare. The way he had paused when she asked what he was actually there for, and the pause had been real. She typed back, Where? His reply came in 40 seconds. I'll send details Friday. She put the phone down. She pressed her hands over her face. She said into her own palms, Tasha cannot know about this until Saturday. She knew even as she said it that this was optimistic. Olivia told Tasha on Saturday at noon. The reservation was at 7. By 1:15, Tasha had laid 3 dresses across Olivia's bed, crossed 2 of them off with the energy of someone making life-altering decisions, and delivered a speech that was somewhere between a protective warning and a hype session, covering everything from trusting her instincts to not giving too much too soon to the fact that Olivia's skin was glowing, and she needed to lean into that. Olivia stood in the middle of the room watching Tasha hold up a deep green dress. That one, Olivia said. That's what I said 20 minutes ago. You said it too confidently, so I had to think about it. Tasha pointed at her. You are a menace, go get dressed. The restaurant was a Querello, sitting quietly in the Russian Hill neighborhood of San Francisco, the kind of place that had been there long enough to become part of the city's identity. It had the kind of interior that felt warm without being loud, dark wood and candlelight, and the low sound of a room full of people in real conversation. It was elegant without trying to prove it. Sangwoo was already there when Olivia arrived. He stood when he saw her come through the door, not as a show. It was simply the thing he did. She noticed it the way you notice something that is small but unexpectedly good. The table was private, set slightly apart from the others, not in an isolating way, but in the way that gave a conversation room to be a conversation. He pulled her chair back. She sat. He sat across from her. She looked at the menu. He looked at the menu. The server came. Sangwoo ordered water and asked Olivia if she had preferences, not performing, not ordering for her, actually asking. She said she trusted the chef on the pasta, and he nodded at the server like that settled it. There was a short beat of the kind of quiet that new situations create. Both of them sitting across from a person they did not yet know and had agreed to know better. Olivia looked up first. She said, "How's the hand?" He looked at her, and something in his expression registered what she was doing, the small joke, the familiar reference. He said, "Good," almost forgot about it. She said, "That's what good stitches do." He said, "Is that your signature move? Humble bragging about your medical skills?" She laughed. It came out before she could decide whether to let it. It was a real laugh, the kind that changes a person's whole face. Sangwoo watched it happen. The dinner moved like a conversation that wanted to go somewhere. He asked her questions, not the polite surface questions that people ask at dinner when they are performing interest. Real questions. She told him about Atlanta, Georgia, where she grew up. About her mother who worked 2 jobs and still found time to cook real meals every night and still found time to ask about everyone else's day before her own. About moving to San Francisco at 24 with a nursing license and a suitcase and a contact number for a studio apartment that was smaller than she expected. He listened in the complete way, not waiting for his turn, actually listening. She said, at some point, "My first year was hard. I lost a patient, a 22-year-old. He came in stable and something shifted and we couldn't get it back. I went home that night and sat in my car in the parking lot for an hour and called my mom and told her I didn't think I could do this." She paused. She said, "Some jobs ask more of you than others. That means they need people who have more to give." Sangwoo said, "Did you believe her?" "Not that night, but I went back in the next morning, so I guess it worked." He nodded. She looked at him. She said, "You haven't talked about yourself much." He said, "You haven't asked." "I'm asking now." He thought for a moment. "I grew up between Seoul and San Francisco. My father built the business here. I came back when I was 25 to run it. I've been here since." She said, "You said you came back, like you didn't want to." He looked at her. She said, "You don't have to answer that." He said, "No, I didn't want to. I wanted to stay in Seoul for another year. There was a design program I had been accepted to." She blinked. Design. Interior architecture. She sat with that for a second. "You do not look like someone who wanted to study interior architecture." "I know. But you gave it up." "I gave it up." She did not press, but she turned it over in her mind, the image of this man, this very controlled, very still man, having something he wanted for himself that he left behind, and carrying it without making it a tragedy. She said, "Do you miss it?" He said, "I miss the possibility of it, the person I would have been." Olivia went quiet, because that was an honest thing to say. That was not a managed answer. She said, almost to herself, "Why am I telling you all of this?" He said, "Because no one usually asks." She looked up. He said it plainly, not trying to be poetic, just saying the true thing. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's either the most genuine thing anyone has said to me at a dinner table or the most effective line I've ever heard." He said, "Which are you leaning toward?" She studied him. "Ask me at the end of the night." The end of the night came faster than either of them planned. They had been talking long enough that the restaurant had thinned out around them and the candle on their table had burned low. They were standing outside on the sidewalk in the Russian Hill evening air, cool and clean the way San Francisco nights get, the city lit up below them, when a man appeared. He came from the direction of the restaurant entrance. He was dressed well, Korean, somewhere in his late 30s. He had the kind of face that had been arranged by nature to look open and approachable, but there was something in the eyes that did not match the smile. He stopped at their table, with the relaxed ease of someone who believed they were welcome everywhere. He said something in Korean to Sangwoo. His tone was warm, familiar. His eyes moved to Olivia with a slow, deliberate appreciation that was designed to feel like a compliment and actually felt like an assessment. Sangwoo's response in Korean was brief, flat, the way a person speaks to someone they are choosing not to give energy to. The man switched to English. He introduced himself to Olivia as Jae-hoon, old colleague of Sangwoo's, just in the area for a few days, so wonderful to run into them. She was clearly a woman with excellent taste. All of it smooth, all of it practiced. The air between Jae-hoon and Sangwoo was a conversation happening underneath the actual conversation. Two people being perfectly polite to each other while communicating something completely different. Jae-hoon said his goodbyes with a smile that stayed exactly the right number of seconds longer than necessary. Then he walked away. The space he left behind felt different from before he arrived. Olivia looked at Sangwoo. She said, "Old friend." Sangwoo said, "Old problem." She almost smiled. They walked to where the car was waiting. He asked if he could see her again. She looked at him for a long moment, measuring, weighing, being honest with herself about what she was actually feeling versus what she thought she should be feeling. She said, "Tell me one true thing, something you haven't told anyone else." He looked at the city below them, a long beat past. Then he said, "I have everything I'm supposed to want, and I don't feel any of it." The words came out quiet, no performance in them. Olivia breathed in slowly. She looked at this man who ran an empire and had given up design school and came to a hospital twice and came to dinner and listened like listening was important, and she made a decision. She said, "Call me." She got in the car. He stood on the sidewalk in the Russian Hill evening and watched the car until it turned. He called. He called on Monday evening, which was 2 days after dinner, which was the exact right amount of time, not so fast that it read as desperate, not so slow that it read as a game. She picked up on the third ring. He said, "It's Sangwoo." She said, "I know, I saved your number." He said, "When?" She said, "When you texted about dinner." "You saved my number, but you still showed up." "I'm a nurse. I have everyone's number, it's habit." He said, "That's not true." She said, "No, it's not." The call lasted an hour and 40 minutes. Neither of them had planned for that. He was in the penthouse, standing at the windows. She was in her kitchen making dinner, one hand on the phone and one hand stirring pasta. They talked about San Francisco, the neighborhoods, the way the city changed and did not change. She told him about the best breakfast spot in the Mission District, a small Salvadoran place that nobody wrote about because the people who knew about it were protective of it. He told her about a bookshop near Chinatown that still felt like it had been there, since before everything around it was renovated. It was a normal conversation. For both of them, a normal conversation was not something they had often. There were more calls, and then longer calls, and then the calls that started in the evening and went late enough that one of them said, "I should let you sleep," and the other one said you could have said that an hour ago, and neither of them had actually wanted to end it. But the world around them was not going to wait quietly. At the hospital, Dr. Preston Hale had been watching. Preston was Olivia's attending supervisor, the head physician over her wing. He was good at his job in the way that people who are competitive rather than compassionate can still be good at what they do. He had the right credentials. He ran a tight ship. He was respected professionally, and he knew how to use that respect like a resource. He was also a man who had spent 2 years positioning himself just close enough to Olivia to be relevant, without ever actually committing to anything real. He appeared at her side during difficult cases with the energy of a partner. He complimented her work consistently enough to seem supportive, but specifically enough to seem personal. He found reasons to be in her space. Olivia was not naive. She had clocked Preston long before this. She had simply chosen not to engage with it because he had never crossed a clear line, and she needed her job, and managing complicated workplace dynamics was part of the reality of being a woman in medicine. But now there was something different in her energy, a lightness that had not been there before. She checked her phone during her breaks with a small, private expression that she did not share with anyone except Tasha. Preston noticed. He began engineering more deliberate proximity, standing at her station during rounds longer than necessary, finding reasons to call her into case discussions that did not actually require her specific input, complimenting her in ways that were technically professional but carried an edge that was not. Olivia felt the uptick. She filed it. She watched it. She said nothing yet. Meanwhile, in Palo Alto, 35 miles south of San Francisco, in a quiet estate off Page Mill Road, where the streets were lined with old trees and the houses sat behind gates, Mrs. Kang arrived. She was Sangwoo's mother. She had lived in Palo Alto for 12 years, since Sangwoo's father passed and the estate was transferred into her name. The house was immaculate. She kept orchids in every room. She wore silk in the daytime. She was elegant in the particular way of women who have built their elegance over many years through deliberate choices. She loved Sangwoo with the specific intensity of a woman who had watched her husband build an empire and her son inherit it, and never once believed that either of them had truly been happy. She had plans for Sangwoo. She had always had plans for Sangwoo. The plans were constructed from love and from fear. Love for who he was, fear of what would happen to what they had built if he did not make the right choices. She had heard about Olivia. Not from Sangwoo. Sangwoo had not told his mother anything, but Raymond had mentioned it to someone in the household network, and Mrs. Kang's network was thorough. She arrived at the Nob Hill penthouse on a Tuesday morning, carrying her own tea, and an expression of open warmth that Sangwoo recognized as the beginning of a careful conversation. They sat in the living room. She poured the tea. She asked about the business. He answered. She asked about his health. He said he was fine. She asked about the hand. He said it was healing. Then she said, gently, with the loving precision of someone who had rehearsed the framing, "I heard you've been spending time with someone." Sangwoo said, "Yes." She said, "A nurse." He said, "Yes." She held her cup with both hands. She said, "Sangwoo, I'm not here to make this difficult. I'm here because I love you and I want things to be good for you. But someone in your position, the business, the relationships, the decisions that have to be made every day, you need someone who understands that world. A nurse, however kind she may be, doesn't have that strength." Sangwoo was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She's stronger than anyone I know." Mrs. Kang went still. Because Sangwoo did not say things like that. He did not talk about people with that kind of certainty. He assessed people. He measured people. He worked with people. He did not speak about them like they had weight. She looked at her son. She saw something in his face she had not seen in a long time. Something she did not quite have a word for but recognized as important. She said nothing more about it that morning. She stayed for lunch. She told him to eat more. She left in the afternoon. But she carried that sentence home with her, and she turned it over in her mind like a stone she had found, and was not sure what to do with. The note arrived on a Thursday night. Olivia was finishing a 12-hour shift, retrieving her bag from her locker in the staff corridor before heading to the staff exit. The envelope was there, plain white, no hospital markings, her name written on the front in block letters. She opened it. Inside, a single sheet of typed text. "You don't know what you're getting into. Walk away while it's still your choice." She stood in the corridor and read it twice. Her jaw tightened. Not fear exactly. She was not a person who went to fear first. More like a sharp, clear anger. The specific anger of someone who has been warned as if they are not capable of making their own informed decisions. She took out her phone and photographed the note and the envelope. Then she put them both in her bag. She did not panic on the drive home. She did not call Sangwoo. Not yet. She sat with it instead, looked at the photograph on her phone, thought about who might have left it and why, and what that said about the kind of situation she was walking further into. She was not naive. She had never been naive. But being aware of risk was different from letting risk make your choices for you. She made herself dinner. She ate it. She went to bed. She told herself she would figure out the note when she had more information. What she did not know yet was that the note was only the beginning. Sangwoo asked her to come to Lowe's Angels. He had business in the Beverly Hills area, meetings in the Century City district that would take up Friday morning, and he wanted her to come down for the weekend. He had a private residence in the hills above Beverly Hills, a house that belonged to him specifically and not to his office schedule. He told her she could say no. He told her there was a good breakfast place 2 blocks from the house that he thought she would like. She said, "What kind of breakfast?" He said, "The real kind." She said, "I'm coming." She told Tasha on Thursday. Tasha sat down. "He has a house in Beverly Hills, and he's inviting you there for the weekend. He has meetings in Century City. The house is just where he's staying." "Olivia, do you hear yourself? Beverly Hills. Weekend. A man who built a private wing of his life around precision just invited you into it. Olivia picked up her coffee. He also told me where a good breakfast spot is. Tasha looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "You are absolutely gone for this man and you don't even realize it." "I'm not gone anywhere. I'm going to Los Angeles." Same thing. They flew down on Friday afternoon. The house in the hills was exactly what you would expect from someone whose entire life was organized around quality and privacy. It was not showy. It did not perform wealth. It was simply well-built and well-kept, sitting above the city with a view that made the chaos below look like something decorative. Olivia stood on the back terrace that Friday evening with a glass of water looking at the lights of Beverly Hills and Los Angeles spreading out below them and said, "Okay, I understand why people live here." Sangwoo was standing beside her. He said, "Wait until the morning." The morning was clear in the way Los Angeles mornings can be before the day heats up. They walked to the breakfast place, a small corner spot 2 blocks down a hill, the kind that fills up early with neighborhood regulars and tourists who found it by accident. The coffee was served in plain white mugs. The eggs were perfectly done. The bread was baked in-house. Olivia said with genuine appreciation, "Okay, this is good." He said, "I know." She looked at him across the small table. He was drinking his coffee and looking at the street outside, and she noticed, not for the first time, but more clearly than before, that he was relaxed. Not the managed stillness of the hospital, not the controlled composure of the penthouse. Actually, quietly relaxed. She said, "You're different here." He glanced at her. "How?" She thought about it. "You're not performing anything." He looked at her. "I don't perform." "Everyone performs. You do it better than most people, but right now you're not doing it." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Most places I go, someone knows who I am before I arrive. The expectation is already in the room when I get there. Here," he looked at the street, "nobody's waiting." She nodded slowly. She understood that. The weight of being expected to be a particular version of yourself before you even opened your mouth. She said, "I know what that's like." He looked at her. She said, "Being the black nurse at an elite private hospital, walking into rooms where people have already decided what I am before I say anything. I learn very fast how to be visible and invisible at the same time." He said, "How do you carry that?" She shrugged. "The same way you carry your thing, you just do, and then you find the places where you don't have to." Something passed between them in the space of that sentence. The recognition of 2 people who carried things and had gotten good at it and were, right now, not carrying it. It was a good weekend, a genuinely good weekend. Which was why it hurt more when it ended early. Raymond called on Saturday afternoon. Sangwoo answered. Olivia watched his face shift, the relaxed quiet she had been watching all weekend pulled back in, replaced by something more structured. He spoke in Korean for a few minutes, brief responses. Then he ended the call. He looked at her. He said, "I have to go back today." She said, "What happened?" He said, "Business situation. It needs to be handled in person." She looked at his face. She could see there was more to it than that, but he had organized his expression into something that was not giving the more away. She said, "Okay." Not pushing, not performing, just okay. He arranged the car back to San Francisco. The drive to the airport was quiet but not uncomfortable. She leaned against the car window and looked at the Los Angeles streets and thought about the breakfast table that morning and the view from the terrace and the look on his face when he was not performing anything. She thought about Raymond's call and the way Sangwoo's face had changed. She thought about the note in her bag at home. She thought about the fact that there were parts of his world that she was not being shown, and that this was probably not going to stay that way. Back in San Francisco, Tasha pulled Olivia aside on Sunday evening. They were at Olivia's apartment in the Marina District. Tasha sat across from her on the couch with her phone and a very specific expression, the one she wore when she had done something that she knew Olivia would object to but believed was necessary. She had Googled Sangwoo Park. Thoroughly. She turned the phone around and showed Olivia what she had found. The articles, the financial coverage, the scope of the business network, The names that appeared near his in deals, in mergers, in industry coverage that stretched from San Francisco to Seoul to Manhattan. Olivia Reed. She read slowly. She did not react dramatically. She took in the information the way she took in everything, carefully, looking at what it actually said rather than what the framing wanted her to feel. Tasha said, "I'm not telling you to leave. That's not what this is." Olivia looked up. Tasha said, "I'm telling you to go in with your eyes open, all the way open." Olivia said, "Has he ever been anything but honest with me?" Tasha said, "No, I know, that's not what scares me." "Then what does?" "The people around him, the ones you haven't met yet, the ones who are going to have opinions about you standing close to someone that important." Olivia was quiet. Tasha said, "You are my person. I am telling you this because you are my person. Keep your eyes open." Olivia looked at the phone in Tasha's hand. Then she looked up and said, "I will." That night, Olivia was on the couch when her phone lit up. She looked at the screen expecting Sangwoo. It was an unknown number, a different unknown number. A text. "He's already pulling you in deeper than you realize. The people around him don't forget faces. Be careful." She stared at the screen. 2 anonymous messages in less than a week. She set the phone down. She pulled out the photograph of the first note on her own phone and looked at both of them. Same source, she was almost certain. She picked the phone back up. She called Sangwoo. He picked up in 2 rings. She said, "I need to talk to you about something." He said, "Tell me." She told him about the note, about the text, all of it, without drama, just the information. The silence on his end lasted 5 seconds. Then he said, "I'm coming over." She said, "It's late." He said, "I know." He came over. He sat in her living room in the Marina District apartment, which was not a large apartment and was not a decorated apartment in the way his penthouse was decorated, but was full of things that looked like her, a stack of books on the coffee table, a throw blanket in a warm orange color, a framed photo on the wall that was clearly taken on a beach somewhere in the South, probably Georgia. Plants on the windowsill, 3 of them, all healthy. She sat across from him. She showed him both messages, the photograph of the note, the text. She laid them out without editorializing. He looked at the photograph. His jaw tightened. Not theatrically, just the muscle moving the way it does when something hits a nerve that is real. He said, "I'm sorry." She said, "Don't apologize, tell me what you know." He said, "I don't know who specifically yet." She said, "But you have a sense." He was quiet. She said, "Sangwoo." He said, "There are people in my world who would use pressure like this, to get a reaction out of me, to see what I do when something I care about is threatened." She absorbed that. He said, "Being close to me has a cost. I should have told you that more directly." She said, "You're telling me now." He said, "You should be able to decide with full information whether." She said, "Do you think I'm fragile?" He looked at her. She said it again, evenly, directly. "Do you think I'm fragile?" He said, "No." She said, "Then stop deciding what I can handle. I am a grown woman who treats people in crisis for a living. I have been managing difficult information since I was 22 years old. What I need from you is honesty, not protection from truth." He was very still. She was not angry exactly. She was clear. There was a difference. Anger performed. Clarity just existed. He said slowly, "I don't know how to do this." She looked at him. "What do you mean?" He said, "This. Someone who's this. I don't know how to be in this without trying to control everything around it, because everything in my life is managed. Everything has a system. And this doesn't have a system. And my instinct when something I care about is at risk is to build a wall around it." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm not a building, Sangwoo. You can't put walls around me. What you can do is be honest with me and trust that I can work with truth." He looked at her, and what moved across his face in that moment was something she had not seen from him before, not vulnerability exactly, but openness. An actual willingness to be seen without organizing himself first. He said, "Okay." Just that. She exhaled slowly. She got up. She went to the kitchen and came back with 2 glasses of water. She handed him one. She sat back down, this time on the same side of the room, in the chair closest to him. She said, "Tell me about growing up between Seoul and San Francisco." He looked at the glass in his hand. He looked at her. Then he talked. He talked for a long time about the specific loneliness of being between 2 places and fully belonging to neither. About his father, who was brilliant and cold, and had never once asked Sangwoo what he actually wanted. About the design program in Seoul that he left behind like a door he closed and never went back to look at. About coming to San Francisco at 25 and taking the business and sitting in his father's office for the first time and understanding that this was his life now and he had never been asked. Olivia listened to all of it. She did not make it smaller. She did not fix it. She just let it be what it was. When he stopped talking, she said, "You've been running something that was handed to you since you were 25. Yes. And you're good at it. Yes. And you hate parts of it." He paused. Yes. She nodded. That sounds exhausting. He looked at her like she had said something unexpectedly precise. She said, "For what it's worth, you should know that the person I see in this room right now, the one who's been talking for the last hour without managing it, is someone worth knowing." He was quiet. Then he said, "You're the only person who sees it that way." She said, "Then your circle needs work." He almost laughed. It was not quite a laugh, but it was close. She showed him the photo on her wall, the one from the beach. It was her family in Tybee Island, Georgia. Her mother and 2 aunts and a cousin, taken about 4 years ago. Everyone was laughing at something that had just happened off camera. He looked at it for a while. He said, "You look like your mother." She said, "She raised me alone. I got the good parts from her." He said, "What are the good parts?" She said, "The part that doesn't quit, and apparently the part that gives difficult men her honest opinion." He looked at her. This time he actually smiled. It was brief and quiet, but it was entirely real. She filed it away as one of the better things she had seen. Jae-hoon's first strategy was corporate. He spent 3 weeks quietly working the edges of Sangwoo's business network in San Francisco, reaching out to partners, planting small doubts in professional conversations. The doubts were not dramatic. They were the kind that are harder to fight because they do not make accusations. They ask questions. They raise concerns. They suggest, softly, professionally, that perhaps Sangwoo's judgment was not as sharp as it once was, that distractions had a way of affecting decision-making, that the park organization might be navigating a period of transition. It was slow. It was designed to be slow. Jae-hoon was patient. But patience had a cost, and Sangwoo's team was not unaware. Raymond tracked the pattern over 2 weeks and briefed Sangwoo in the Nob Hill penthouse on a Wednesday evening. He laid out the pattern, who Jae-hoon had contacted, what had been said, which relationships had been gently destabilized. Sangwoo listened to all of it with his hands folded in his lap and his face completely still. Then he said, "How much of this has he committed to?" Raymond said, "Enough that he believes it's working." Sangwoo said, "Let him believe that." Because he had already thought 3 moves ahead. But Jae-hoon was also thinking. And Jae-hoon understood something that people who had underestimated Sangwoo for years had failed to understand. The best way to make a precise man make an imprecise move was not to attack his business. Business, Sangwoo could manage with his eyes closed. Business was his native language. The right move was to attack what Sangwoo valued in a way he had not yet built a system to protect. Jae-hoon had been watching. He had people watching. He knew about Olivia. On a Saturday morning, Olivia was at a farmer's market in the Pacific Heights neighborhood, a good Saturday habit she had maintained for 2 years. Fresh produce, good olive oil, a bread vendor she was loyal to. The market was busy in the pleasant way that outdoor markets are busy, full of people moving slowly and taking their time. She was standing at the bread stall when a voice came from beside her. "That's the sourdough from the back, better than the one at the front." She turned. Jae-hoon was standing there, dressed casually, relaxed, open expression. He said his name. He reminded her they had met briefly at the restaurant in Russian Hill. He said he did not mean to intrude. He was just in the neighborhood. What a coincidence. Olivia smiled at him. The flat, polite smile she kept specifically for situations like this. She bought her bread. She let him speak. He talked warmly. He talked about San Francisco. He talked about Sangwoo with the specific fondness of someone who wanted to establish familiarity before they delivered something else. Then he said, carefully, "I've known Sangwoo a long time. I say this because I respect what I can see you two have. People who get close to him, they don't always realize the cost until later. I would hate for you to find that out the hard way." It was not a threat. It was framed as concern. That was what made it more dangerous than a threat, because a threat you could dismiss, but concern had to be responded to carefully. Olivia held her bread bag and looked at him pleasantly. She said, "How did you know where I'd be this morning?" Jae-hoon's smile did not change, but something behind his eyes did. A very small adjustment, the kind you make when someone says something you did not expect and you are recalibrating. She said, "This market isn't listed anywhere associated with me. I didn't post about it, so you either followed me here or someone told you I'd be here." She looked at him. "Which is it?" Jae-hoon said nothing for a moment. She said, "Tell Sangwoo I said hi." She picked up her grocery bag and walked away. She made it to her car, put the grocery bag in the back seat, and called Sangwoo before she started the engine. He picked up immediately. She said, "Jae-hoon just approached me at the Pacific Heights Farmers Market. He knew I'd be there. He said things designed to make me nervous about being close to you. He framed it as concern." A pause. "He's watching me, Sangwoo." The silence on his end was exactly 5 seconds. He said, "I'm coming to you." She said, "He's gone, I'm fine, but come." He was already moving. He drove from Palo Alto, where he had been in the middle of a meeting with 2 associates, and he did not finish the meeting. He told Raymond they were leaving, and Raymond did not ask why, because Raymond could read a situation. When he arrived at Olivia's apartment, she had put the groceries away and made tea, and was sitting on the couch with her phone in her hand and a quiet, thinking expression on her face. She was not upset in the way that fear makes a person upset. She was upset in the way that violation makes a person upset, the anger of someone whose space had been entered without permission. Sangwoo came in. He sat across from her. He looked at her face. He was measuring her, not in the clinical way she measured patients, but in the way of someone who cared about the measurement, making sure she was okay, really okay. She said, "I'm fine." He said, "I know, I can see that." She said, "What is he doing?" He told her, clearly and completely, the corporate destabilization. The approach at the restaurant that he had already suspected was not a coincidence. The pattern of gathering information about what Sangwoo cared about so that he could use it as leverage or as bait. She listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "He wanted you to find out. He wanted you to know he was close enough to approach me." Sangwoo said, "Yes." She said, "He wants a reaction from you." He said, "Yes." She looked at him, "So don't give him one. What can you actually do?" He looked at her. This was the question she had asked in the restaurant, and now she was asking it again. Not what do you want to do, not asking him to perform strength or aggression. Asking him what was actually available to him as a real option. He said, "He has 3 key financial partnerships in Manhattan. If those partnerships shift, his position in San Francisco becomes impossible to sustain." She said, "Can you make those partnerships shift?" He said, "Yes." She said, "Then do that, quietly, before he realizes you're moving." He was quiet for a moment. He was looking at her like she had just done something that surprised him again. And she had. She had not told him to be careful. She had not told him she was scared. She had sat across from him and helped him think. He said, "Okay." He pulled out his phone. He made 2 calls, brief, precise, in English and Korean. He relayed specific information. He used the tone of voice that was not his boardroom tone and not his personal tone, but the one that was simply and clearly in charge. When he was done, he put the phone away. She said, "How long will it take?" He said, 48 hours for the first move. The rest will follow." She nodded. She picked up her tea. He said, You walked away from him at the market. She said, Of course I did. Most people don't see through it that fast. She said, I told you. I know how to be visible and invisible. You learn to read situations quickly. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, He's not going to just accept this. She said, I know, but let's deal with what he does next when he does it. Right now you should eat something. You drove from Palo Alto and I have bread from the market and eggs. He stared at her. She stood up and walked to the kitchen. He sat there for a second, looking at the space where she had just been sitting, and then he stood and followed her into the kitchen. That evening, Raymond came to the penthouse with a tablet in his hand, and a face that told Sangwoo the thing on the tablet was not good news. He said, There's something you need to know about Jae-hoon. He's not working alone. He handed Sangwoo the tablet. Sangwoo looked at the screen. His jaw tightened. Because the name connected to Jae-hoon's network, the name that kept appearing in the financial thread Raymond's people had pulled together, was someone who had access to things that a stranger would not have. Someone who had proximity. The chapter closed on Sangwoo's face, still and unreadable, looking at the screen. The name would change everything. The name on the tablet was Preston Hale. Sangwoo set the tablet on the table and sat back. He thought about what he knew about Preston, which was not much, because he had not paid much attention to a hospital supervisor. He thought about the note at the staff entrance. He thought about the text to Olivia's phone. He thought about the shift change Olivia had mentioned in passing, something she had dealt with at work the previous week, a rescheduling of her rotation that she had pushed back on and resolved without thinking much of it. And he thought about Jae-hoon. Raymond laid it out clearly. Preston Hale had financial investments in a development project in San Francisco's Mission Bay district, a waterfront development that had been quietly and significantly funded by a holding company connected to Jae-hoon's network. Jae-hoon had identified Preston through his connection to Olivia, a professional supervisor who had a personal interest in her, and used that to fold him into something larger. Jae-hoon gave Preston a purpose. Jae-hoon needed information on Olivia, her schedule, her location, her routines. Preston provided it, believing he was gathering intelligence that would eventually give him an opening with Olivia, some way to demonstrate that Sangwoo was dangerous, and he, Preston, was the safe and obvious alternative. Jae-hoon let him believe that, while using him as a tool for something entirely different. Preston thought he was hurting Sangwoo to get to Olivia. Jae-hoon thought Preston was a convenient source of information about the woman who was closest to Sangwoo. Both of them were using each other, and both of them had used Olivia in the process. Sangwoo stood up. Raymond said, What do you want to do? Sangwoo said, We're going to the hospital. He arrived at Meridian Elite Medical Center in the late morning with Raymond beside him, and a folder that Raymond had prepared, financial records. The connection between Preston's investments and Jae-hoon's holding company, the timeline of contacts between the two men. He asked for Preston at the front desk. He was shown to a conference room near the administrative section. Preston came in 2 minutes later. He was wearing a white coat and carrying the composed expression of a man who had learned to look unrattled professionally. But when he saw Sangwoo and saw Raymond beside him, something shifted behind his eyes. He said, Mr. Park. Sangwoo said, Sit down. Preston sat. Sangwoo opened the folder and placed it on the table and turned it so it faced Preston. He did not speak while Preston looked at it. He let the information do the work. Preston looked at the pages. His breathing changed. Sangwoo said, You've been providing Olivia's location and schedule to a contact connected to Jae-hoon's network. You sent a note to the hospital staff entrance. You sent a text to her personal phone. You orchestrated a shift change in her rotation to reduce her schedule quality, and then positioned yourself as support when she pushed back. Preston opened his mouth. Sangwoo said, I'm not asking for confirmation. I'm telling you what I know. He leaned forward slightly. He said, You have one option. You resign your position at this hospital today. You end all professional and personal contact with Jae-hoon's network, and you remove yourself from Olivia Carter's professional and personal space permanently. Preston's composure tried to hold. It held for approximately 30 seconds. Then he looked at the folder again, specifically at the financial records, and 30 seconds was all it had. He was about to speak when the conference room door opened. Olivia walked in. She had been paged for a case and had passed the administrative corridor and seen Sangwoo's car in the lot, and then seen Raymond through the conference room window. She had connected enough to walk in. She looked at the room. She looked at the open folder on the table. She looked at Preston's face. She did not need Sangwoo to brief her. She was a woman who paid attention. She had been paying attention to Preston for 2 years and to the notes and the text and the shift change, and she had been building a picture. The picture was now complete. She looked at Preston. She said, "You spent 2 years in my professional space. You positioned yourself as a supporter. You used access that I extended to you in good faith to watch me and report on me to someone you knew was trying to use information about me as a weapon." Preston said, "Olivia." She said, "No," flat, clear. "You don't get to use my name right now." She looked at him with the specific steady expression of someone who has arrived at absolute clarity. She said, "You should go." Preston looked at Sangwoo. Sangwoo said nothing. He didn't have to. Preston picked up the folder, then realized it wasn't his to take, set it back down. He stood. He walked to the door. He stopped for a moment with his hand on the doorframe. He seemed like he was going to say something. He didn't. He walked out. From the nurse's station at the far end of the corridor, Tasha watched Preston walk away with his white coat and his reduced posture. She looked at the conference room. She slowly, deliberately, clapped once. The conference room was quiet. Olivia stood near the door. Sangwoo was across the table from her. Raymond stepped outside. She looked at him. She said, "You came here without telling me." He said, "Yes." She said, "You handled it without asking me." He said, "Yes." She said, "I told you to stop deciding what I can handle." He said, "I know." She said, "Then why?" He looked at her. He did not have a managed answer prepared. He had the truth, which was less clean. He said, "Because I have never had something to lose before." He paused. "And I don't know how to be careful about it without being wrong about it. I moved too fast. I know that. But someone was using you to get to me and I..." He stopped. She watched him. He said, "I couldn't sit with that." She was quiet for a long moment. She was looking at him with the particular expression she had when she was reading a situation completely rather than reacting to it. She said, "You were wrong to come here without telling me." He said, "I know." She said, "We're going to talk about that properly." He said, "Okay." She said, "Not here." She walked to the door. She held it open. She said, "Come on." He picked up the folder. He walked to the door. He walked out beside her. That small thing beside her, not in front, not behind, registered to both of them. Meanwhile, Jae-hoon received a call from one of his Manhattan contacts that afternoon. The call did not have good news. 2 of his 3 key financial partnerships in New York had withdrawn, quietly, professionally, with the kind of decisive clarity that told him someone had gotten there first. The 3rd partnership was reviewing their position. Jae-hoon put his phone down on the desk of his San Francisco hotel suite and sat back. He had miscalculated. He had assumed that targeting what Sangwoo cared about would produce an aggressive, visible reaction, the kind that damaged reputation and destabilized operations. Instead, Sangwoo had moved sideways underneath before Jae-hoon had even realized the board had shifted. He called his assistant. He said they were leaving San Francisco. He was on a flight out by evening. He built an empire. She built a life. Together, they built something neither had planned. 6 weeks later, San Francisco was doing what San Francisco did in the early fall: clear mornings, warm afternoons, evenings that cooled fast and made the city feel like it was exhaling after the effort of summer. Preston had resigned from Meridian quietly. The hospital's administration had accepted it without significant disruption. A new attending supervisor had been brought in, a woman named Dr. Fatima Osai, who turned out to be direct, competent, and not interested in anyone's personal life, which Olivia found deeply refreshing. Tasha had immediately decided she loved Dr. Os, and told anyone who would listen. Jae-hoon's presence in their world had receded to the status of a closed chapter. His Manhattan network had not recovered the partnerships he lost, and his San Francisco position had become untenable without them. He was not gone forever. Sang-woo was not naive enough to believe in that kind of permanence, but he was gone from immediate range, and that was enough for now. Mrs. Kang had not called Sang-woo about Olivia again, but she had asked Raymond twice, in different ways and with different phrasings, how Sang-woo seemed. Raymond had told her the same thing both times. Good. He seems good. And the way Raymond said it, with a slight emphasis on the second word that told her he did not mean it in the functional professional sense, but in the actual human sense, had given her something to think about. Olivia went to Atlanta. She had planned this trip for 3 months, a long weekend at her childhood home in the East Atlanta Village neighborhood, where her mother still lived in the house Olivia had grown up in, the one with the wide front porch, and the yard that her mother maintained with the same determined care she applied to everything in her life. She flew into Hartsfield-Jackson on a Friday afternoon. Her mother picked her up. Her mother, Donna Carter, who was 57 years old and 4 inches shorter than Olivia, and had the same eyes, and had raised her daughter alone from the time Olivia was 8, hugged her in the arrivals lane for a full 20 seconds before saying anything. She said, "You look good, you look rested. What's different?" Olivia said, "Nothing's different. I'm just happy to be home." Her mother gave her a look that communicated clearly that she had raised Olivia, and was therefore not fooled by Olivia. She did not push, but she watched. That evening, sitting at the kitchen table while her mother cooked, real cooking, the kind that took time and filled the house with smells that Olivia had been storing in some part of her memory since childhood, her mother said, casually, as if she were commenting on the weather, "There's someone, isn't there?" Olivia looked up from the glass of water she was holding. Her mother was stirring something on the stove with her back to her, but Donna Carter always had a way of reading rooms without needing to look at them. Olivia said, "Yes." Her mother said, "Okay." That was all she said for a few minutes. The stirring continued. Then she said, "Tell me about him." Olivia thought about how to answer. She thought about the hospital wing and the navy jacket and the coffee stain on her own scrubs. She thought about the dinner in Russian Hill and the breakfast in Beverly Hills and the farmer's market and the conference room and the phone calls that lasted too long. She thought about his face in her apartment in the Marina District when he was not performing anything. She said, "He sees me, not a version of me that works for him, not the version that's useful or impressive or easy, just me." Donna stirred slowly. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "That's rare." Olivia said, "I know." Donna nodded, the nod of a woman who had lived long enough to understand the value of what her daughter had just described. She said, "Is he coming to Atlanta?" Olivia said, "I didn't ask him to." Donna said, "Did you tell him you were coming?" Olivia said, "Of course, we talk every day." Donna turned around and looked at her daughter. She said, "So he knows where you are?" Olivia said, "Yes." Donna said, "Okay." She turned back to the stove. The way she said okay, the second time was different from the first time. It carried the specific weight of a woman who had already decided something. Saturday morning, Olivia was on the front porch with her second cup of coffee. The East Atlanta neighborhood was doing its morning thing, neighbors walking dogs, the sound of someone mowing 2 houses down, the smell of late summer still in the air. She heard her mother's voice inside, talking to someone. Then the front door opened. Her mother stepped onto the porch, and behind her, carrying a small and neatly wrapped package and wearing a dark blue shirt and looking entirely out of his usual context and entirely at ease in a way that shouldn't have been possible but was Sang-woo. Olivia stared at him. He stood on the porch of her childhood home in East Atlanta, Georgia, a long way from San Francisco, a long way from the Nob Hill penthouse and the Beverly Hills house and the frosted glass doors of a private hospital wing. She said, "You came to Atlanta." He said, "You told me your mother's cooking was worth the flight. I decided to find out." Behind him, Raymond was standing at the bottom of the porch steps, in the kind of professional distance, that communicated both respect and awareness of exactly where his role ended. Donna Carter was standing in the doorway behind Sangwoo, looking at her daughter's face. She pressed her lips together and turned away quickly because she was someone's mother, and she was not about to cry on the porch over a man her daughter had known for 2 months. But she was also not going to pretend that the look on Olivia's face wasn't the thing she had hoped to see for years. She went back inside. Olivia looked at him. She said, "You should have called." He said, "You would have told me not to come." She said, "I know." And she looked at him for a moment. This man with his empire and his given-up design school and his honest pauses and his organized way of caring about things that he was still learning how to show, standing on her mother's porch with a wrapped gift and no agenda except to be there. She stepped aside and held the door open. He walked in. The house smelled like everything her childhood smelled like. Her mother's cooking and old wood floors and the faint smell of the flowers her mother kept on the windowsill in the kitchen. It was warm and specific, and nothing about it was designed for someone like Sangwoo, and he walked into it like it was somewhere he had been trying to get to. He handed Donna the package when she came back from the kitchen. She took it with the polite, measured expression of a woman reserving judgment. She opened it. Inside was a tin of jujube tea, the specific variety from a specific brand that was difficult to find in Atlanta, but that Olivia had mentioned once, briefly, in a phone call weeks ago, describing how her mother had always kept it in the cabinet and how she hadn't been able to find it in San Francisco. Donna held the tin and looked at it. She looked up at Sangwoo. He said, "Olivia said you liked it." Donna was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I do." She held the tin with both hands. "Thank you." She looked at him with the specific assessment of a woman who raised her daughter alone and is now looking at the man her daughter's face changes for, looking at whether the things that matter are there or not. She said, "Come inside. Breakfast is almost ready." He sat at Donna Carter's kitchen table in East Atlanta, Georgia, and ate breakfast with Olivia's family. Her 2 aunts had arrived. Her mother's sisters, Charlene and Renee, who had heard someone was visiting and showed up in the way that family shows up in tight family networks, which was to say with no warning and complete ownership of the situation. Charlene asked him 3 questions in the first 4 minutes that would have been uncomfortable in any other context, and were only marginally less uncomfortable in this one. He answered all 3 directly and without deflection. Renee watched him closely and said very little and then said to Olivia's mother in a quiet aside that Olivia pretended not to hear, "He's not performing. I hate when people perform." Donna said, in an equally quiet voice, "I know." Sangwoo caught Olivia's eye across the table. She looked back at him with an expression that said, "This is them. Take it or leave it." He looked back at her with an expression that said, "I'm staying." After breakfast, Charlene and Renee left with the specific satisfied energy of people who had come, assessed, and reached a verdict. Donna went to the back of the house to make phone calls. Sangwoo and Olivia sat on the front porch. The neighborhood was mid-morning quiet now. A few people walking. The sound of Atlanta traffic in the distance, low and constant. Raymond had moved to the car at the curb. Far enough, present enough, professional enough. Sangwoo was looking at the street. Olivia was looking at her coffee cup. She said, "Your mother called me." He turned his head. "When?" 3 days ago." He was quiet. She said she was formal, careful, but she was honest. She looked at him. She said she's known for a long time that her son needed someone who wouldn't manage him, and that she thought I might be that person. Then she said if I hurt him, she would make my professional life very complicated. A pause. I believe her. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "She called you." "She did." "My mother called you." "I think she was checking me out. And maybe—" Olivia tilted her head, warning me that she's watching, but it was actually a nice call. Strange but nice. He turned back to the street. He was processing something that looked like the particular surprise of a person who thought they knew the people in their life, and just found out they knew them less completely than they thought. He said, "She never mentioned it to me." Olivia said, "Women, have conversations that don't need to go through the person they're about. He said, apparently. She looked at him. He said, you're not scared of her. She said, I grew up with Donna Carter and Charlene and Renee. Your mother made one call. I'm fine. He almost laughed. It was the third time she had gotten close to making him laugh in a way that was not managed. And each time, the laugh had been slightly less guarded than the one before. The sun moved across the porch. The morning moved toward afternoon. She said, you know this isn't simple. He said, I know. She said, my life is in San Francisco. My work is specific and serious. I'm not going to rearrange myself. He said, I don't want you to. She said, and there are parts of your world that are going to be difficult. People who have opinions. Situations like the last few months. He said, I know that. She said, I'm not going to pretend none of it is real. He said, I don't want you to do that either. She looked at him. She said, then what do you want? He looked at her directly, without the controlled expression, without anything managed in the way his face was carrying it. He said, I want to keep talking to you, every day, about the real things. He paused. I want to find out what else you know about breakfast spots and farmers markets and what you look like when you're actually happy. I want to come to Atlanta again when you're here. Another pause. I want you in my life in the specific, actual way, not a managed version of it, the real version. She looked at him. The porch was quiet. East Atlanta moved around them. She said, Sangwoo. He said, yeah. She said, I'm glad you came back that second time, with your perfectly fine hand and your completely unnecessary follow-up appointment. He did not respond immediately. He looked at her with that quiet attention that was one of the first things she had noticed about him, the way he gave his full self to whoever was in the room with him. Then he said, so am I. She reached over and took his hand, the left one, the healed one, the one she had stitched in a private hospital wing when he was a stranger who sat in a chair and did not explain himself to anyone. She held it in both of hers and looked at the street. He looked at their hands. He looked at the porch. He looked at the neighborhood and the morning and the life that was happening around them, ordinary and specific and real. He did not say anything else. Neither did she. They sat on her mother's porch in East Atlanta as the day moved quietly around them, and it was nothing like his penthouse, and nothing like her apartment, and nothing like the private hospital wing where they had started, and it was exactly right. In Palo Alto, Mrs. Kang was in her garden with her orchids when Raymond's message came through. She set down her watering can. She looked at the photo. It was taken at the kitchen table, clearly candid, not posed. Sangwoo was mid-sentence, saying something to someone off camera, and he was laughing. A real laugh, unreserved. The kind that took over the face completely without asking permission. Mrs. Kang did not remember the last time she had seen her son laugh like that. She was not sure she ever had. She set the phone down on the garden table. She picked up her tea. She sent Raymond one message. She's good for him. Raymond read it and put his phone back in his pocket and looked at the front porch of a house in East Atlanta, where his employer and a nurse in fair skin and a warm orange sweater were sitting in the morning sun. And he thought, not for the first time in 11 years, but for the first time with this specific feeling, that things had arrived somewhere good. The story ends here. Not with a declaration made in a grand room, not with a gesture designed to impress. With two people who started in the most ordinary way, one injured hand, one set of careful stitches, one exchange that should have been 5 minutes and was never really over after that, sitting on a porch in Atlanta in the morning sun, holding the same hand she had fixed weeks ago, having chosen each other not in spite of what was complicated, but after working through it honestly. He had an empire. She had a life. And what they were building together was neither of those things. It was something they had not had a name for at the beginning. By now, they did not need one. She gave him 5 stitches and sent him home with a pamphlet. He flew to Atlanta with jujube tea and sat at her mother's kitchen table and answered every question her aunts had. And somewhere between a private hospital wing in San Francisco and a porch in East Atlanta, two people who were not looking for anything found the one thing that made everything else make sense. If you made it to the end of this story, I need you to drop a comment and tell me your favorite moment. Was it the pamphlet, the porch, or was it the moment he said, "I've never had something to lose before"? Tell me. And if you've been watching this whole time without subscribing, you already know this channel is worth it. Hit the button, because the next story is already coming, and I promise you it hits different.